Hi, I'm Dan Schmitt. I do a weekly television show called Team Chicago Challenge. My website is teamchicago.tv, teamchicago.tv. We're here at Donelson's motorcycle shop. We're about 20 miles northwest of downtown St. Louis, which is St. Anne's, Missouri. Every year we get together to honor Neil King. Neil King was the godfather of flat track racing, the godfather of short track racing. I learned quite a bit about motorcycle racing from Neil. We come back here every year to honor him. I had the opportunity to talk to some of the racers, and the next 10, 12, 14 minutes, we're going to see what they have to say about Donelson's, getting together with this racing thing and what racing was like back in the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. And don't forget my website, teamchicago.tv. As we look at this bronze statue of Neil King at Ascot Park, in 1961, he won 19 finals out of 29 races. He dominated out at Ascot Park in California in the late 1950s and early 1960s. As we look at Neil King's personal BSA Gold Star and a few pictures of him racing and the poster of him winning the AMA National at Ascot Park, there was another very fast racer that came along in the late 1960s, the lowest paid Yamaha rider ever, and we're going to look at some scenes from the movie On Any Sunday.
There are several hundred professional AMA racers in the United States, but there's only about 15 who have the ability to win Mert's #1 plate. The riders are guys like Mert, definitely not the Hollywood image, but highly skilled professionals. Like Dick Mann, a former #1, Gary Nixon, twice #1, Gene Romero, Cal Rayburn. Most are small, around 5'6" or 5'8", and most are young, like Mark Brailsford, 20. Dave Smith, 21. Dave Aldana, 20. Don Castro, 19. Keith Mashburn, 20. Frank Gillespie, 22. Jim Odom, 23. Jim Rice, 23. Watching them in slow motion, they look almost casual in their actions, but they're doing over 100 miles an hour. Most riders can expect to lay it down several times a season. Some of them are involved in some unbelievable crashes. Keith Mashburn, number 30X, went right through a 4x4 fence. Later, he was picking the straw out of his hair, and 10 minutes after that, he was back on the track, letting it hang out further than ever. If they didn't have the ability to shake it off and get back on the track, they wouldn't be professional racers.
And now we're going to meet one of the stars in the movie On Any Sunday, Keith Mashburn.
Good. My name's Keith Mashburn. I'm from Simi Valley, California. And I'm a racer from the late 60s into the early 70s. I did my sportsman stuff in Southern California, moved up the ladder kind of quickly, and in 1968 was hired by Yamaha International Corporation to race their Yamahas. The bike that was built for me, the flat tracker, and I became #1 novice in the nation on that bike, was built by Dennis Mahan, who also built Neil King's bikes earlier. And so it was quite a, I wouldn't say a treat, but a step down for Dennis to go from the national winning Neil King to tuning for me, a new novice in Southern California. But after a short time, Dennis and I hit it off well, and I learned the importance of a tuner. I also learned that the importance really is that tuner was also a good manager and coach. And I think Dennis gained all this experience from tuning for Neil. Dennis was able to introduce me to Neil. Neil was transitioning, leaving the California area. I was just coming up, but I guess I was very lucky because with the 2 strokes that Neil was running and the 2 strokes that I was running, they're very similar, and we were both sharing.
So which engines are we talking about?
We're talking about the twin 250 is what I ran. But Neil was running primarily the DT1 engine, the single 250, but I also ran them also. Kind of a side note is I would go to the races, I had one of each bike. I usually liked the single better, the way it handled. And every time it come race time, Dennis would say, no, you're riding the twin, because I'd actually go faster on the twin.
What frames were you using then? What was
Strictly SonicWeld, Ray Hensley
right?
built frame.
So those are rigid frames when you started?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all rigid.
So the twin was it the road race engine? Was it the DT?
It was the TD1C road racing engine.
Right. Okay.
Very, very specialized, very unique engine.
With the dry clutch setup and
no, it didn't have dry clutch.
Didn't have dry
it had
clutch. Okay.
Wet clutch, and it had the remote float carburetors.
Right.
And it ran perfectly every week.
But those were really fast motors. So how about at Ascot riding one of them? What was that like?
Ascot was a pure joy on the twin because the bike handled so well and it was so incredibly fast, and that I had the upper hand on everybody.
So how many other half miles did you run? In California, how many races could you make back then? Or was Ascot the main Friday night?
We would run every Friday night at Ascot from April to October, but then you would have San Jose mile that we would run, and then the half mile at San Jose, probably at least a minimum of 5 other tracks in California alone. And in '68, we took the twin and went to Sturgis, and I won that race. And that was on Sturgis, a half mile, I believe. And also took it to Houston Astrodome and ran there. I was kind of the odd guy that would run the twin on almost all the short tracks.
So is this when you were a junior by then, or
No,
you still in that? They ran novices at the Astrodome?
You're right.
Or would you have been at?
Thank you. You're
Right.
right. It was the following year. And
So you would have been a junior and
Yeah.
you rode the twin on the short track though.
Yes.
What was that like?
That again, unfortunately, I wasn't able to win the race because the chain broke, but I was running away with it when the
So
chain
it did work on the short track, even at.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I took it to Daytona as a junior, ran it against the experts, and won all the races. We ran it as a junior against the experts at Ascot on the quarter mile, and I won all those races. So, yeah, I was kind of the oddball that would take the twin and run it on the short tracks when everybody else preferred the
And
single.
you made it work, and that was all rigid tail bikes then. You didn't have the swing arm. Did you ever have a swing arm with that bike?
No, never did. The entire season ran without it, and of course, no brakes.
No, yeah, right. So did you have a compression release or no?
They were available to us, but we didn't use them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So you had to really pray slowing down, you had to really toss it in the corner to get it to turn.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't understand that running without brakes is not that difficult.
Right. Well, I understand. Right.
You know, but it's odd. But when everybody's doing it, it's the way to do things. And I think it made better riders because you would have to put the bike, set it sideways and stuff to burn off speed going into the turns.
Right. Okay. So you turned junior. Did you start running a 650? Were you still with Yamaha at that time?
I was still with Yamaha, and on the flat track, Yamaha had me ride a 350 twin, and that one did have suspension. And because they didn't have a 650, they allowed me to ride a Triumph on the TT events. And so I rode a Triumph for Dusty Coppage. It was his. And I won Peoria, I won Houston.
The junior races?
Yeah.
At Houston too, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
I won Castle Rock, I think Ascot. But I won several junior nationals riding Dusty Coppage's Triumph, and those were in the races that Yamaha allowed me to ride. In the flat track events, I didn't come out quite as well because the 350 wasn't reliable enough to finish all the races. It was lightning fast, and I was.
And was that still that was the air cooled one though?
Yeah, that was
right.
the air cooled one.
Right, the RD 350.
Right, and one of the difficult problems with it was when you would cross behind, say, a Harley that was putting up a large spray, I would have to downshift because it would knock it off the pipe, and so it was a handful to ride. And we were competitive, but we didn't win a lot of races.
Right, right. Okay, so you turned expert, then what?
Expert, we went to the XS 650, and
So you were the first year with that bike?
yeah, that's
And what
correct.
kind of chassis were you using?
What kind of chassis?
Yeah.
It was a Trackmaster. The original bikes we ran were stock frames, and we would literally break the frames just riding on the track.
Right.
They weren't doing well. I worked for Yamaha at the time also, and I was a test rider, so I did a lot of the prototype development work on that bike. And we did that the first year, and then we moved over to Shell through it, and Shell started building the bikes, and we became more competitive. I had a very fairy tale type win at Ascot Park. They had the Yamaha Gold Cup, and I was riding that bike for the first time and won the race. So
At Ascot.
at Ascot.
Against Harleys, Triumphs, BSAs, all the big guys. I
All
mean,
the big
Gene
guys.
Romero,
Mert, Gene, Gary Scott,
Jim Rice.
Jim Rice, Mark Brailsford, they were all there. And it turned out that myself and Jimmy Odom had a tremendous race, ran into each other a few times.
And what was Odom riding?
He was riding a Triumph.
Right, okay.
And that was, like I say, kind of a fairy tale win, but it really put the XS 650 on the map.
And then what? So you
I-
said you quit early, though.
I quit early. I rode until, I rode a few races in 73, and Triumph, Norton, they dropped their teams. I was dropped from the Yamaha team. Some guy named Kenny Roberts came up, and I think I was having a hard time competing against him. So end result is I found myself without a ride, and the other factories were dropping all their riders, so I decided to go another route, and I became a Ventura County fireman in 75. And I did 31 years with them, and I kept my fingers about. I stayed out of racing for 10 years, and I came back and started attending get-togethers and became very active in the Trailblazers Motorcycle Club, and vice president, started putting that together, and had a great time. I was very, very happy to be back, and I have to say, 30-some years with the fire department, great career, great people. But I would always go back to my motorcycle roots. Those are the greatest people in the world.
Well, we should point out that the Trailblazers has one of the biggest banquets of vintage motorcycle people getting together. It is a huge event.
Yes, yeah. When I went in, they were getting 200 to 300 people a year. Now we get 800 people. It sells out the first week we put out the tickets for sale. And we have a group that is just fantastic. And you know, for instance, this year, Norm MacDonald being inducted, and we have an induction process where we bring people into the Trailblazer Hall of Fame, and it's the who's who of racing.
Thank you, Keith, and I want to thank everybody from Donelson Cycle for having this annual event. A good opportunity for a good number of racers to get together. For more information on Donelson Cycle, they're at 9851 St. Charles Rock Road, St. Anne, Missouri. The phone number is 314-427-1204, and their website is DonelsonCycles.com. That's DonelsonCycles.com. Special thanks, and for more information on Any Sunday, the movie, great footage, go to OnAnySundayFilm.com, OnAnySundayFilm.com, and I want to thank them for letting me use some great footage. For more information on the Trailblazers Motorcycle Club, their website is TrailblazersMC.com, TrailblazersMC.com. You want to get a hold of me, it is TeamDan45@gmail.com. Don't forget TeamChicago.tv, WalkWithDan.com. On YouTube, search with Dan Schmitt Motorcycle Racing.